For decades, outsiders spoke about Africa as if it were fragile. They pointed at maps, statistics, and headlines, and forgot that behind every number was a heartbeat. But Africa is not fragile. Africa is the sound of market women laughing at sunrise. It is the rhythm of drums echoing across hills. It is the prayer whispered quietly before work. The world judged Africa by its storms. They never stayed long enough to witness the rebuilding. Because every time Africa falls, it stands again. Our history is carved with struggle, colonization, drought, poverty, injustice. But struggle did not erase identity. It revealed character. Grandfathers who worked fields with blistered hands still found time to tell stories under the moon. Grandmothers who had little still shared meals with neighbors. Children watched. They learned. When life becomes heavy, we carry it together. That lesson shaped a continent. In a crowded city, there lived a young girl named Amina. Her house had no electricity. Her parents could not afford textbooks. So every evening, she walked to the roadside and studied under the glow of a streetlight. People laughed at her. Some pitied her. But Amina didn't see hardship. She saw a doorway. She dreamed of becoming a doctor, not to leave Africa, but to heal Africa. Years later, the same people who once laughed brought their children to the hospital where she worked. That streetlight had not just lit her books, it illuminated a future. In a quiet village, a farmer named Kofi lost everything to drought. The soil cracked. The crops died. Hunger loomed. He could have left. Many did. Instead, he studied the land. He learned new methods. He planted smarter, not harder. And slowly, green returned. Neighbors came to watch. He taught them everything he knew, freely. Soon, the entire village had food again. Children were fed. Families stayed together. Failure did not destroy Kofi, it trained him. There is a city where innovation rises like skyscrapers, where car mechanics become inventors, and market sellers become business owners. You hear music, commerce, prayer, laughter, ambition. This city once carried the label dangerous. Today it is called opportunity. Because when communities refuse to surrender, streets become classrooms, and neighborhoods become incubators. Progress is not a miracle. It is courage repeated daily. A teacher named Mama Grace worked in a broken school. No desks, few books, a leaking roof, but she walked in each morning with a smile. She didn't just teach math. She taught dignity. She told students, "Your circumstances are not your destiny." Years later, her former students became nurses, engineers, writers, teachers, and one became a minister who rebuilt that very school. Hope had entered the classroom and never left. Across the continent, entrepreneurs are rising, not only to profit, but to solve problems. A young man in Ghana created affordable building bricks. A woman in Kenya launched low-cost solar lighting. A team in Rwanda built drones that deliver medicine to remote villages. They didn't wait for big organizations. They didn't wait for governments. They saw a need and answered it. This is not charity. This is empowerment. Africa carries something priceless: memory. Through songs, dances, proverbs, and stories, wisdom survives. Elders speak. Children listen. Identity is passed forward like treasure. Culture does more than entertain. It reminds every African child, you come from strength. In a world trying to erase roots, Africa chooses to remember. Across Africa, millions of young people refuse to wait. They build apps in bedrooms, film documentaries with smartphones, launch campaigns for justice and fairness, create online businesses from villages. They inherit challenges, but also fire. They do not say, someday. They say, now, and history bends. Africa speaks, not with anger, but with quiet strength. Do not define us by our scars. Watch what we build with them. This continent does not deny its pain. It transforms it. From Lagos to Kigali, Nairobi to Accra, Kampala to Cape Town, the same truth echoes. We are not broken. We are becoming. And one day, history will say, Africa did not just survive. Africa led, the story of the fire that would not die. They say there was once a continent the world misunderstood. They looked at its maps, but never listened to its heartbeat. They judged its storms, but never felt the warmth after the rain. They wrote headlines about struggle, but forgot to write about the courage. This is the story of that continent. This is the story of Africa. In a small village beneath a mountain that glowed gold at sunset, a child named Ayo was born. Ayo's name meant joy, that his village had forgotten what joy felt like. The river had dried. The crops failed. The young people were leaving. But Ayo's grandmother, Mama Kemi, always whispered, "Drought tests the roots, not the sky. If the roots survive, the tree will rise again." Every evening, she told Ayo stories. Stories of kings who ruled with wisdom. Stories of explorers who crossed deserts with only stars to guide them. Stories of farmers who prayed, planted, waited, and believed. And every night, Ayo wondered, if our stories are so powerful, why does the world only see our scars? Years passed. Ayo grew tall. The village grew quiet. So he decided to leave, not to escape, but to understand. He traveled across dusty roads, catching rides from strangers who became friends. In the north, he met desert traders. They taught him, the desert gives nothing easily, but it teaches you how to carry only what matters. In the savannah, he met farmers building irrigation from scraps. They smiled and said, "If the rain will not come, we will learn to move the river." In a bustling city, he saw young people coding in tiny rooms, building startups powered by hope and cheap internet. They said, "We are tired of waiting for opportunity. We'll build it ourselves." Ayo began to understand. Africa was not sleeping. Africa was quietly preparing. In a lakeside village, Ayo met Miriam, a teacher who ran a school beneath a mango tree. She had only one chalkboard. Half the children shared the same notebook. Yet every morning she stood tall and declared, "One educated child is a village rewritten." Parents paid her with fruit, bread, sometimes nothing. But she still showed up. One afternoon Ayo asked, "Why do you keep teaching when everything is so hard?" She smiled gently. "Because empires collapse when they forget their children. Civilizations rise when they teach them." Ayo felt something shift inside him. He realized the true heroes were not on TV. They were mothers, farmers, teachers, traders, ordinary people refusing to surrender the future. Then one season, rain clouds gathered over his old village. New wells had been dug. Young engineers returned home. Solar panels blinked like small stars across rooftops. The river flowed again. The elders cried tears they pretended were rain. Ayo walked to the mountain at sunset. The same mountain, now brighter than ever. He remembered his grandmother's words. Drought tests the roots. The roots had survived. And something else had grown. Innovation. Ownership. Belief. Across the continent, Ayo saw patterns. Markets buzzing. New roads stretching into places maps once ignored. Hospitals rising where dust once settled. Voices demanding fairness, dignity, and progress. He realized Africa was never broken. It was interrupted, misunderstood, undervalued, but not defeated. And like a drum slowly getting louder, it was beginning to speak for itself. Before she passed, Mama Kemi called Ayo close. She placed her hands on his shoulders. "My child, do not let the world write our story for us. Tell them about the hands that build, the minds that invent, the hearts that refuse to give up." Ayo promised. And that promise became his mission. He would become a storyteller, not to romanticize, but to reveal. He would tell the world, Africa is not asking for pity. Africa is investing in possibility. And so, when people said, Africa is struggling, AO replied, Africa is preparing. When they said, Africa is poor, he said, Africa is rich, and learning how to own its richness. And when they said, Africa will never rise, he smiled, because he had seen the roots, and he knew the tree was already growing. So what does this mean for US right now? It means we must tell better stories. We must celebrate builders, dreamers, creators. We must invest in ideas, not stereotypes. And wherever you are watching from, if you believe Africa's best days are ahead, you are already part of this story. If this touched you, share it with someone who needs hope. Comment where you're watching from and what gives you faith in Africa. Subscribe if you want more stories that honor our roots and future. Support creators and projects that build, not exploit. Because every time this message spreads, another spark lights up somewhere. And sparks become flames. Flames become warmth. Warmth becomes a sunrise. And Africa is stepping into the light. The day the drums spoke again, they say every village has a sound. Some have the sound of waves. Some have the sound of wind. But in the valley of Umutu, the sound was silence. Years ago, the drums stopped. The elders wrapped them in cloth and hid them in a hut. War had passed through like a storm, and with it went music, laughter, and trust. Children grew up hearing only whispers. Don't be loud, don't attract attention, don't dream too big. But one child didn't fit into silence. Her name was Zola. She was small, curious, stubborn, and always barefoot. She would sit outside at night and listen to the stars, convinced they were saying something. One evening she asked her father, Baba, why don't we play the drums anymore? He sighed, because once the drums called people together, and when people came together, someone became afraid. Zola thought for a long time. Then maybe the problem wasn't the drums. Maybe the problem was fear. Her father didn't answer, but his eyes softened. One afternoon, while chasing fireflies, Zola stumbled upon the abandoned hut. Inside, dust danced in shafts of sunlight. And there, wrapped like sleeping giants, were the drums. Her fingers trembled as she touched them. They were cracked, but not broken. She felt it instantly. There was something still alive inside them. That night she whispered, if drums are meant to speak, who are we to silence them? Before sunrise, she carried one drum to the edge of the village. Her heart was racing. She lifted her hands and struck. Once, the sound rolled like thunder across the valley. Birds shot from the trees. Dogs barked. Windows opened. People gasped. Another beat, then another. Something began to wake inside memories. The elders rushed out, shouting, Stop! You don't know what you're doing. But Zola didn't stop. She wasn't playing noise. She was calling something forgotten. By the third rhythm, children began to smile. By the fourth, teenagers gathered. By the fifth, even the elders stopped shouting. Because suddenly, they remembered weddings. They remembered harvest festivals. They remembered unity. The drums were not about war. They were about belonging. For the first time in years, the village gathered in the square. The oldest elder stepped forward, his hands shaking. He placed his palm on the drum and whispered, We hid our voice to survive a storm. But the storm has passed. Then he looked at Zola. Play, child. Let the valley breathe again. And she did. Dancers moved barefoot on warm earth. Laughter floated like smoke. Mothers sang songs their mothers had taught them. Even the mountains seemed to listen. News spread across neighboring villages. They came walking, riding bicycles, arriving in pickup trucks. Not for food, not for charity, for music. And with music, conversations returned. Farmers shared knowledge. Traders exchanged ideas. Young people discussed businesses and apps. They began forming cooperatives, planting together, selling together, dreaming together. A visitor once said, "You started with drums and ended with development." And Zola smiled. "No, we started with fear and ended with courage." Years later, when people asked how Umutu transformed, the elders answered, "We did not discover oil. We rediscovered each other." And across Africa, the story traveled. Communities began reopening marketplaces, cultural centers, youth hubs, tech labs, farms, not because someone saved them, but because someone reminded them, when we gather, we rise. The drums taught something powerful. Progress is not only buildings. Progress is people remembering who they are. Zola grew into a leader, not in politics, but in spirit. She taught, culture is not weakness. Unity is not superstition. Identity is not the opposite of innovation. It is the foundation of it. And whenever fear tried to return, she simply tapped the drum. Boom, 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 and the valley remembered. Africa's strength was never silence. It was always the rhythm. If this touched you, share it with someone who needs hope. Comment where you're watching from and what gives you faith in Africa. Subscribe if you want more stories that honor our roots and future. Support creators and projects that build, not exploit. Because every time this message spreads, another spark lights up somewhere. And sparks become flames. Flames become warmth. Warmth becomes a sunrise. And Africa is stepping into the light.